As you may know, the popular show Ed, Edd n Eddy has been running for a long time. However, between October 7th, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office that the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of trying to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1. At 5 AM Eastern Time, people reported a very disturbing episode appearing on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently the quality of the episode was mediocre when held to the regular standards. The animation was choppy, sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down, similar to a crappy VHS tape, were also received. Scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing, without changing props and any other background objects. Rather stormy looking. Characters also behaved oddly. Instead of their normal, goofy, hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful towards each other, and constantly about to begin sobbing after their lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why, but he spoke with a sexualized tone, which further bothered the viewers. I was one of those viewers. The episode began with Eddy walking down the street with Ed. I noticed that Double D was missing. There was an angular shot coming from in front of the two to show them walking towards the viewer. Eddy was wearing an angry look, like the look he does when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around the iris. Ed looked absolutely forlorn and practically dragged behind Eddy, tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series' antagonist, was riding his bike opposite of the Eds, towards them. The shot became blurry, and low moans were heard coming from Eddy before Kevin hit him, which never happened because the screen went to black. The screen then snapped back, and Kevin was again headed towards Eddy. The view was so blurry this time that all I saw was a green blob headed towards a yellow blob. Again, the low moan. Only this time it sounded like the microphone was broken and the loud static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddy's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and started shivering. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around his circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps becoming the only audio. The steps sound like they were very clear, as I was shown a bird's eye of him scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Double D began screeching, something like a Fisher cat, as he moved wildly around the cell of a room, faster and faster, until the screen began blurring again. The purple room's color swallowing a now orange blur. An extreme close-up of Eddy's front door sat in absolute silence for a maddening long time, at least 2 minutes of dead silence and a door. Next I see Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor of some sort, probably an oral doctor. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, is crying loudly, and Sarah is trying to confront him in an unusually warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah. It hurts." Suddenly, the door of the room is smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room, and Jimmy was finally shown. His headgear was mangled, the front bent upward, stretching his lip very high, almost to tearing proportions. The front of his gums were trickling blood, and teeth were missing. The disturbing part, however, was that he had lost both his arms and legs beforehand, apparently, and sat paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion that the others had beaten him up so bad that he bent his headgear. The camera stayed on this mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. After commercials, we are instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf in his darkened shed, fisting a cow repeatedly. The visual loops and gets blurry again as the screen pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is now perfect. Eddy is now alone, without Ed. The quality declines worse than before, and he is still walking, the sun now lightening the mood somewhat, as he smiles and begins running. The door is shown again, and we see through Eddy's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring, the only audio in the scene. As he makes his way through the house, Eddy opens the door to his room. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushions as he crawls out on all fours in a comedic way and pops up behind her, still oblivious. I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eyes, and I thought of a mole. Suddenly I stopped laughing as he started swallowing her head, still in a cartoonish fashion, of course, but this was different. He had stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed an extremely small human eye. Double D was laying on Eddy's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddy's house for the remainder of the episode, and the next program began on the spot.